What is going on, YouTube fitness family? Excited to have you guys back. By popular demand, I'm going to show you guys, I'm going to unlock the perfect shoulder workout. And this is going to help you grow some pumpkin delts. And it's not going to be heavy shoulder pressing because that's not going to do it for you. So this is going to come down to 4 key principles before getting into the actual exercise so you guys can understand. So there's 3 main muscle groups that make up your entire deltoid. So you have front delt that runs here. You've got medial delt, which runs kind of over the side, and then rear delt right there along the back of your shoulder. So really what you want to have is a balanced approach with a tilt towards medial delt training. And the reason for this is because when you stand, you want to create as much width as possible to create this aesthetic. So many people are doing heavy ass raises, and really all you're doing with this is you're shrugging up the shoulders and you're building up your traps, which is actually condensing your physique. Because if you got those big, you know, linebacker, fat neck, fat traps, actually gonna make you seem more narrow than wide. So what we wanna do is grow our medial delts. That's why most of the focus of this training session is going to be towards medial delts. So that's number 1, balance approach, tilt towards medial delts. Number 2 is going to be an emphasis on time under tension. If we can put ourselves in a mechanically advantageous position to get really good negatives on all of our movement patterns, whether it be a pressing, where we're getting a really nice stretch, or a lateral raise, time under tension is going to be key. It's not huge muscle groups. So you don't want to be hitting it with huge weight, because what you're probably gonna be doing is taking over with either your triceps, your upper chest, or your lats to perform either a heavy press, or like I was mentioning, your traps to take over on a heavy raise. So that's number 2. Number 3 is the stretch bias. What I mean by that is we want to put ourselves under load in a stretch position, and that's gonna do 2 things. Number 1, it's gonna maximize growth. So let's say we're doing a lateral raise with a cable. We wanna really focus on providing tension in the stretch position, or a cable Y raise here, really still having tension here. So we're gonna be minimizing movements that, for example, a traditional dumbbell raise is not a terrible exercise, but you have almost 0 tension in the stretch position here because that load is going directly through the floor. So we're gonna be using a lot of cables as opposed to dumbbells. Not to say dumbbells can't be used, but I'm gonna show you how to be as optimal as possible. That's the key word here. And number 4 is pre-exhausting before we press. So traditionally, so many people start off with either a heavy barbell standing or a dumbbell press, or even a machine press, because they're like, oh, you know, I wanna have the most energy to press heavy. At the end of the day, that's the exact opposite of what you wanna do. You wanna build some warmth, some fatigue before we go into our pressing movements, because then we don't have to use as much weight to drive just as much stimulus at adding it maybe in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th exercise. So I'm gonna show you where I usually add it in my training session, so I have enough fatigue, but not so much fatigue that I literally can't even press the weight. So without further ado, let's get into exercise number 1. All right, exercise number 1, starting with a bang. This is an amazing movement for medial and rear delts, which, as we mentioned, were super important in building that nice capped aesthetic shoulder from the front and from the side, because your rear delt is really what pokes out in that side pose. It creates that really 3D look in your, let's say, side chest, side tricep, or if you're standing on the beach. It looks pretty dope. So what we wanna do is set up a bench, essentially about a foot behind the cables. We're gonna go about 20 to 30 degree incline here, and see at my bottom of my rep, crossover grip, I already have tension in that most stretched position. And so what I wanna do is arch the back, drop the shoulders down, slight elbow bend. We're gonna maintain the elbow bend through the entirety of the movement. So we're not gonna go any straighter or any more bent. We're gonna maintain this, like, essentially if you're thinking as straight as 180 degrees, we're gonna go about 170 degrees. I don't know anything about being straight, so that's why I got this 170 degree elbow bend. So what we're gonna do is that slight elbow bend, cross the cables over one another, get that maximum stretch, raise to about ear level, head height, slow release. But you see how I don't let my shoulders drive up towards my ears? I don't start to take over with my traps at all. So many people, when they raise, do this one. I want to keep the shoulders down and back, scapular retract, and make sure those traps actually stay as minimally involved as possible. So maintain that slight elbow bend, crossover, big stretch up in a Y shape, squeeze, slow eccentric load. The majority of the work of this exercise is gonna be done in that eccentric and in the stretch position, holding that stretch, boom. Nice contraction, slow eccentric load, maintain that, but you see how much I'm holding that contraction in the delt. So the reason that it's so important to focus on that negative is because when we're performing reps for a longer duration, we're increasing what's called time under tension, which means the amount of time that your muscles actually under load. So we can actually use less weight to drive just as much and usually way more stimulus than if you were to just slang and bang and put on 70 pounds on this and just try to crank heavy ass reps. You're not gonna get almost anything out of it. It's gonna go all in your traps. You're gonna wake up the next morning, but I can't even turn my head. So we don't want that. We want big boulder shoulders. So yeah, this is an amazing first movement, driving blood flow, and you can even, towards the last set, do some stretch partials. So here, when you get to failure with the full reps, come across, big stretch, and only go up to where you can without starting to take over and shrug those shoulders to the trap. So start here, create that fatigue, and also minimize injury risk for your presses later in the workout because you've already built up all of this warmth in the shoulder. All right, let's see, just after one movement, what this pump is looking like. I can't even get my, I did it pretty crazy just after one movement pattern. And as I was mentioning from the side, see how that rear delt is very, very prominent in any side pose. So if I'm either setting up for a side chest or even hitting a side chest, you see how a lot of what makes up the delt is actually that rear delt. And then even from like rear shots, when you pull up and hit that rear double, that rear delt is a lot of what makes that shot look so good. So yeah, that's one movement. Shoulders are looking pretty nutty already. So let's go to exercise number 2. Okay, so exercise number 2, we're gonna be using the V grip on a seated row setup. You can either do this on a seated row or just use the floor. I like the seated row because you have the bench and this positioning is really nice. What we're gonna do is use a V grip, which you traditionally use for like a seated row. What we're gonna do is we're actually gonna flip our hands and we're gonna go thumbs down. So we're gonna grab here and here. What this is gonna do is put us immediately in a stretch position for the rear and medial delt. You see, even before I pull off with full, you can see how those muscle groups, see the rear delt and medial delt, are already under tension. And the reason I'm doing this standing is, first and foremost, it's gonna take the traps out of the equation. It's gonna allow me to focus almost all of the tension in my medial and rear delt. And number 2 is, I don't have to worry about the balance and the fatigue built up from standing and getting pulled forward by, let's say, a barbell. And then the last thing even to add to that is just the vector of force is perfect because you still have tension in the stretch position at the bottom of the rep, and then you've got just tremendous even force curve provided by the cable. And that's why I really love cables, because you can really control where that force is coming from and how even that force is distributed over the course of the rep. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna not have my feet on there, because usually if I go too far back, I'll top out the mechanism, but I'm gonna pull the shoulders down and back. I'm gonna big stretch. I'm gonna drive up. As I drive up, I'm gonna lie all the way back on the bench, squeeze, go right down the body. And you see how by having my pinkies up, it drives the elbows up naturally. And you see how my shoulders are still down, so I'm not shrugged up. My shoulders are still down. And you see how that movement pattern goes right into that medial rear delt. I'm gonna sit up on it slightly, get a big stretch, let that weight pull me forward, pull up, and squeeze. Slow on that eccentric load, dragging it right down your body. You're gonna go right into that stretch, pause in the stretch, get really comfortable there, and then consciously drive without raising the shoulders up. And that's why I really love this, because a lot of times people will feel a lot of traps in an upright row, but for me, this goes just directly into my delts. Remember that big stretch, almost trying to pull through the pinkies. Elbows drive up, shoulders stay down. Go to where your basically knuckles get right to your upper chest, and then slow eccentric load. And these, after, I mean, only 4 reps in, the burn is literally here and here so acutely, just because we're managing where that force is coming from. We're trying to take as much involvement out of the traps, and I don't have to worry at all about getting pulled forward or back, because essentially I'm lying back and using bodily leverage by lying back. And everybody's like, oh, you like to do cables because you're lazy. Partly yes, but there really is science behind why I do what I do. And I want to accumulate fatigue in the target muscle group and not like create CNS fatigue for no fucking reason, right? Like there is no reason for me to just be tired just to be tired. So what I want to do is find movement patterns that are going to drive as much acute stimulus into the target muscle group with minimizing the amount of either acute, either injury risk, or just bodily fatigue overall, which is going to hinder not only the performance in the exercise, but also maybe hinder my recovery and my readiness for my next training session. So try this out, flip the grip, really try to go lighter than you think you would need to learn the movement pattern. And this is one you can actually load up. So like for example, my working sets are about 120 pounds, which is way more than I'd be able to do with a standing barbell, but watch how much control I have with 120 pounds. And I like literally cannot tell you how good this movement pattern feels to me personally. You guys might be like, this is absolute garbage. But if you feel like that, shoot me a video, tag me in your Instagram story. I will help you to refine your movement, because I've shown this to so many people, and once they refine it just a little bit, it's one of their favorite shoulder exercises. So try it out. Let's move on to movement number 3. Okay, so next we are going to finally go into, you guys have all been waiting to do, some presses. I'm not saying you can't do pressing, but it's within the confines of those principles we talked about, time under tension, range of motion. So I'm gonna unlock a little hack for you guys. Don't use the seated military. It's too upright. What this allows you to do is get more scapular retraction. So put the incline on a bench to like 80 degrees. So we're not completely upright, we're not 90 degrees. We're usually 1 notch below completely upright. And you'll see the positioning that allows me to get in here is so comfortable, and it allows me to see how much depth I can get without even having any shoulder discomfort. So what I want to start with is here. Elbows are slightly in front of my body. We're not going 45. We're slightly in front. We're not all the way back here. We're right about there. Nice, comfortable positioning. And what I want you to start feeling getting comfortable with is getting comfortable at basically touching the front of your delt to almost to your bicep before pressing out. And we're gonna press consciously through the shoulder cap, slow eccentric load, arch back, chest nice and open, reaching down, pausing in the stretch, and then conscious drive through the delt. And so this is not what you normally see when it comes to shoulder pressing. And every single rep, I want to almost get a little deeper in that stretch, because as I've talked about before, my training is almost therapeutic in the sense that every single time I do a rep, I'm stretching that tissue out, which is going to do a couple things. For force growth, because the more motor recruitment, the more mechanical tension, the more growth. But also, if I'm stretching this tissue out while I train, it's just staying longer and healthier, and I don't have to do a ton of stretching and body work outside of my workouts. So you see here, big stretch bias, reach down as far as I can get, consciously push out. And you see how much pump I get from just one of those working sets. And I wasn't ever out of control. I wasn't ever just jerking the movement. I don't feel any tricep involvement on that at all. No upper chest. Sure, I could do 100, 110, 120, 130 with really explosive form, but I'm gonna start driving with my lats, start driving with upper chest. So same thing with the exercise number 2, acute stimulus and driving the load through the shoulder cap. All right, so let's get some rear delts in. Biggest thing with rear delts, and I see people make this mistake a lot, is focusing more on trying to jerk it up, have heavy, try to use heavy weight on, like, let's say a dumbbell reverse fly. The problem with that is you have almost no tension in the stretch position. So what we're gonna do here is a side facing reverse fly on the machine. So what we wanna do is actually lean out. We're going to push tension into the rear delt before even starting our first rep. So that's already off the stack, and then we're gonna come cross body. I don't wanna see you rotate back. What I wanna see is actually keeping this almost static, so you can see how much I can stretch across without changing the angle here. But once I start to do this, I'm gonna lose stretch in the rear delt, and it's gonna push the stretch in my lat. So what I wanna do is nice proud chest, scapular retraction, big stretch to the rear delt, keeping the static across and up. So these usually will track naturally up, which is totally fine. So come across, really embrace the stretch position, pause there, up, slight squeeze. But you see, I'm not worried about trying to, like, that's why people will start doing this thing, because they want to like feel like they're getting full range of motion. Really, the range you want to worry about is actually that cross body range. I'm less worried about the range at the top of the rep. I'm more worried about the range here in that stretch and getting as much mechanical stretch as possible here. And I like those partial rep failures. So if you get the failure right here, all rear delt. Yeah, so with these, like I said, focusing on not rotating, feeling a stretch, pushing the body forward to get as much stretch as possible through that rear delt. Come up without rotating, get as far as you can comfortably, keeping the contraction in the rear delt, coming back across, maximizing stretch. Once you hit that failure with the full reps, partial rep burnouts. All right, last exercise, but definitely not least, we are going to use cuffs, which wasn't one of my favorite things, not in the bedroom, but in the gym, 100%. So what we're gonna do is we're actually going to take this and we're gonna clip it in behind us. So the reason we go behind is because you see in front, it's gonna be more of a Y-raise variant, so you're gonna get a little rear delt involvement. But if we push the weight behind us, it enables us to essentially keep all of that tension in the rear delt. So I've got this set up behind me. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm gonna grab here on the cable mechanism and lean out and push the hips forward so my big ass can get out of the way. And you can see here, I already have tension in that stretch position. And then when I raise, now I've got complete isolation. The shoulder stays down. The trap is completely not involved. There's literally no trap involvement at all. I have tremendous, it hits all my principles. I have tremendous tension here. You see the shoulder's still on in the stretch position, and then I have complete isolation through that medial delt. And the fact that you have the cuff allows you to have no emphasis on your grip, or the grip to be the reason you're failing. And also, it takes out one lever, right? So obviously you have elbow to delt, but then you take out the wrist and you put it right here and closer to that axis of rotation. It's actually gonna even push more tension with less weight into the tissue, some physics type shit. So also, last thing to note, I put this cable at mid-height so that at my stretch position, instead of it being on the floor and that tension reducing, if we're coming from here, that vector of force is coming across. No, I still have mechanical tension in that stretch position. Amazing way to finish the workout. So thank you guys. I hope you loved the workout. Like I mentioned, doesn't necessarily mean that these are the exact exercises that you have to do, but take the principles I taught you at the beginning of the workout. So even if you want to do a barbell press, not my favorite movement, but if you stop doing a barbell press like this, you start doing like this, I'm 100% okay with it, right? Because now you're using the principles of maximizing range of motion, maximizing time under tension, and utilizing the muscle group to its fullest potential without injuring yourself, that is what I'm worried about. So don't think that these are the only exercises that you can ever do ever again, but take those principles and apply it to the exercises that you like to do. Also, if you're not using my app to optimize your workouts, you're literally missing out on an amazing opportunity, super low cost for the month or for the year. Try it out for 7 days free, no obligation. It would mean the world to me if you guys could go check it out. Send me a message about how much you like it or dislike it. I really want to improve it as much as I can. So I love you guys. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and we'll see you on the next video.